back video. Okay. I haven't done this in a minute. So, yeah. Hi, Cody, aka SMOUSE.
Hi.
Hi.
Mm.
It's a pleasure to have you here today with us. The first ever Superhive interview series with our creators. So, yeah, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it's the first one. It's no pressure.
Yeah, no pressure, no pressure. Thank you so much for joining. Um, Yeah, this is kind of an experimental series, at least as we get the ball rolling. But there's been a lot of requests from the community to hear more from our creators on the marketplace. And yeah, your products and your shop look amazing. I've
Thank you.
personally used some of your shader packs before in my own Blender doodling around. And actually,
That's
in a couple
fun.
of real life meetups here in New York City, people have mentioned your shaders, actually, when I say that I work for Blender Market Superhive Autotroph, and I'm going to stay in frame.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you so much for being here. I guess to kick it all off, I'd love to ask you how you found Blender and what your first steps in Blender kind of look like. So, tell us a bit about your Blender journey.
Yeah, so I actually started using Cinema 4D a lot longer ago than I started Blender. And I started out like I think the Blender version would have been like 2.3 or something when I first started. So it was a long time ago. Or like for Cinema 4D. Cinema 4D was just a lot easier at the time in comparison. And I think I started at like 7 or 8 years old. And so it was just like a lot of like kind of fumbling through to see, just like kind of playing with it. And then eventually I started doing some client work around 2018-ish. And then around that time, like to 2020 is when I started seeing more like Blender stuff. Like that's when like from when Blender 2.8 was released, I started tinkering with it a little bit, but it was still pretty foreign. And then I had some friends who they were showing me some like kind of interesting things that you could do in Blender that you couldn't do in Cinema 4D or any of like the render engines and stuff. So then they kind of convinced me to like apply the stuff I was doing to Blender to see if I could make it work. And then I stuck with it. I never went back to Cinema 4D.
Wow, smooth
And
sailing
then
from there. That's really interesting. I guess these days I haven't met too many people who have transitioned from Cinema 4D to Blender just because it's so open source, accessible. I feel like younger people kind of jump on the Blender train. So that's a really unique
mhm.
sort of arc. Can you tell us? You just mentioned that Blender had some stuff that Cinema 4D didn't. Do you remember what any specific examples of that?
It being free was a huge one because I was paying for the Octane render engine, and they have a free version for Blender, but I couldn't get it to work for some reason. And that kind of just motivated me to stick with cycles and to learn what it can do. And it could actually do a lot more kind of stylized things than Octane could do. You could like really like rip apart the shaders and kind of make it work exactly how you want it to. And Octane was very limiting. So I was like, oh, like I can do a lot more technical stuff now with this. And it's just a lot more liberating. And at a time too, when like work was really slow, it helped to just like take away any monthly expenses that I could. And so like, oh, Blender's free. I don't have to like pay for any of this stuff anymore. So especially when like I'm not working for a few months and like I'm just wasting money on things I'm not using. So that was a huge motivator too at the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The accessibility of Blender is pretty awesome because all these monthly subscriptions can really rack up over,
Hmm.
I pay for way too many apps, I have to say.
Yeah.
So yeah, having not to pay for Blender is really amazing. Do you have some early work that you can recall that you were particularly proud of or that got you really excited about iterating just in 3D in general? It could be from your Cinema 4D days or your early Blender days.
Yeah. So when I was using like, or so just before I moved to Blender, I was building a plugin for Cinema 4D that was like just this really fleshed out and complex. It was a car paint shader that was like a configurator, and it was like all built into the UI, and you could do all sorts of like crazy advanced procedural stuff with it. And that was my first like major technical project because I never made like an add-on before that, and I didn't know how to like program stuff. I didn't know how to like how any of it worked. And so I spent almost 2 years making that. And my goal for that was to make it the best car paint shader that Octane had, because there wasn't really a good option that allowed you to like it wasn't a good option that you didn't have to go and dive into the nodes and figure out what everything did. And then if you wanted to like add your own stuff, you had to know a lot more about nodes. And I had a lot of people asking me if like it could be built into this UI, so you could just use some sliders and make it very intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
And then so I did that, and then I realized how capable and how many like avenues and options there are to explore just on the technical side. Because like I started out as like doing art stuff, and then through like various like work projects and stuff, I was like they needed me to do technical rigs, so I had to do some rigging and automate some things and all that stuff. And then that's when I ran into a lot of roadblocks with that at first because Octane was very limited. And then when I moved to Blender and Cycles, I realized like how much more you could like dive into it and rip stuff out of it. So
That's super cool.
yeah,
When you
and that one I
started,
was very proud of.
yeah, I'll throw it up here on the screen. And yeah, I'm excited to check that out too. So, can you tell us? I have a couple of follow-up questions. Can you tell us exactly what a
Mhm.
configurator is, what you were working with in Octane Cinema 4D to build a UI-based tool, and yeah, what the roadblocks and challenges of that look like?
So Octane doesn't really, because of the way the render engine, like what type of render engine it is, it focuses on physically accurate, like kind of light simulations. So you can't go in and like tweak things that go beyond like the normal physics in real life. And so actually, so I that there's a specific point that I realized that I couldn't continue this project as deeply as I wanted to because it was too limiting. And that's when I realized that you could with cycles. So I wanted to expand that and go from my configurator and go into like this full like automotive material library, but have it be procedural because the car paint was procedural, and that was the biggest selling point because there wasn't that procedural one at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to do like a procedural carbon fiber, but you can't rip apart like the UV information of procedural shaders in Octane. And so, but you can in cycles, and that's what allowed me to do that. And I was like, oh, I should like I'm very limited and crammed with Octane, so let me just kind of see how far I can translate it to Blender. And then when I started doing that, I realized like all my other problems were kind of lifted as well. So I was like, oh, now I can explore all this other stuff. But um, for the configurator, um, so what was the the part of your question?
The second part of my question was how did you start building out the UI on top of all these procedural shaders that you were building, and that's kind of a slightly different skill set than building a node map, because then you're working directly with the code under the hood in Blender. But actually, I have a follow-up question, and this is really for me. When you say that Octane, like in Octane, you can't manipulate the UV information, is Octane like a PBR based system, sort of like Substance?
Yes.
So you're just
Hmm.
working with like the diffuse map, the
Yeah.
color map. Okay, okay. So yeah, it's extremely limiting compared to the stuff that you're
Yeah.
excited about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got you. Yeah. Do you feel like I love shaders. I'm obsessed with shaders. I don't build them myself personally, but what really got me excited about you using Blender personally was November and hanging
Mm.
out with huge procedural nerds on like Arundel's server, for example. And it really changed the way that I move through my own life. You know, like walking down the street, I'm like, oh my God, how do I how do I
Mm-hmm.
recreate this concrete, Like how do I recreate this
Mm-hmm.
bark? Just a shader of this bark, like what would that look like? And simple stuff like subsurface scattering was like a really new concept to me and really changed the way I move through the world. So do you have some specific examples of those characteristics of textures in the real world that you were excited to manipulate in the node-based workspace in Blender?
Yeah, so like I have that exact same thing that you were just describing, where like when I was working on the car paint, like in that time and still now, like I whenever I look at a car, I'm like I'm hyper focused on like the different properties of how like the little pieces of glitter flakes react with the different like sunlights and like how it looks in overcast, and like glossy car paint was one of the hardest ones to make to look good because it's hard to make it not look like a plastic.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever I see like a really good glossy out in life, I'm staring at it. I'm like, how is this doing it? And then my girlfriend, she doesn't come from a 3D background, but
Mm-hmm.
now she's like in the same thing because like I kind of bleed off onto her. And so like she's always like, "Oh, that's so cool. Oh, I love that one. That looks really cool. Like, can you do that?" And yeah.
That's
And then
awesome.
the same with the shaders plus, with it being like caustics based, and it kind of replicates features from Octane,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to like get those features replicated, it's made me like be hyper focused on like little nuanced details in real life. So it's like I'll be in like a restroom bathroom, or sorry, restaurant bathroom, and I'll notice like little soap scum on the sink, and it's got like this little thin film edge, and it's like all like rainbowy, and all that. I'm sitting there looking at it, and then I'm like moving my head to see how it reacts with the light, and I'll take a picture of it as a reference, and then I'll try and recreate it and make sure it, like everything lines up properly. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
yeah.
feel you on that. I've been there. I've been that weird person in a public space, just like fixating on a detail, and people are moving
Hmm.
through the space, like, what the heck is this person up to? So that's really awesome. I'd imagine that, like, with building these tools, while some of us are really excited about the complexity of procedural shading and all the different factors that go into making something appear like beautifully rainbowy and like like the caustics that make it just the perfect amount of glossy and not plasticky. Well,
Hmm.
that's exciting for you to build. Part of making a tool is sort of bridging the gap between the complexity under the hood and
Hmm.
the sliders available on the for the users on the user end. So how do you approach sort of that balance?
So that was a big learning step for me with the car paint stuff, because I ended up making that one way too complex, and and kind of like a summary of the whole car paint thing, that flopped in terms of sales and kind of reach. Not necessarily because it's bad, just because of marketing, but it's just that ended up being too complicated to use for the normal person. That was like the biggest feedback, was like it's it's still intuitive and easy to understand what things do, but there was so many extra options on top that like most people don't use, and so it's like it's just too much information for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took that, and I so most of my products that I make are my own solution to my own problems. And so like if I run into it, like if I need something specific for a job or for a project, I'll make it myself. And then if it ends up being something that I think has potential to be a product, I'll go through and I will break it down to the most simple just kind of settings and UI that I can. And I try and make it in such a way that like you don't want to strip away too many advanced features for people who want to like really dive into it. Um, but you don't want it to be so hard that it turns people away from it. You still want it to just be like with the caustics, it's just like I made sure it was just like one slider to turn on. Like there's so many different values that you can use to tweak it, but most people aren't going to use that, so you got to reduce it as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so really I try and like go at it from like, if someone was just starting out learning Blender today, you want to make sure that like your product can be used by them, and like that they understand what everything does right off the bat, instead of having to like have kind of prior knowledge on how things work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. So the first product you released, you would say is like it was a little too complex for the user, and
Mm-hmm.
you learned from that and kind of simplified your product, right? For folks who are just opening Blender today.
Yeah, but not too simple.
Right, yeah, still
That's it. Yeah,
still allowing
yeah.
them to dive in.
It's a hard balance to try and figure out, because yeah, you don't want to like create like a, I don't want to say like a newbie product,
Mm-hmm.
but like you don't want to make something that like the like more advanced people, you got to make it friendly for both.
Yeah, yeah, and you just said that you make the product that you want to use,
Yeah,
right? So in order to fill that void, you have to make it complex enough for you yourself to have fun with and get the results that you're looking for and the nuance of results that you're looking for.
yeah,
That's a tough balance to strike.
it is. And like I've got about 5 products on hold right now because I'm trying to figure out how to make it more simple. Because they're good for me to use because I know how to use them. But if I were to give it to someone else, the goal is to not have to teach them how to use it.
Yeah,
So like you want them to be able to open it, and it's like, oh, well, I just do that and that does that. That's great. Whereas
right.
like that is that really hard balance to find.
Yeah, for sure. As you know, I work in creator support here at Autotroph. So I get a lot of tickets from folks who like don't know how to install an add-on. And
Hmm.
sometimes the attitude is like, this isn't working, this is supposed to be easy. And I'm like, okay, step one, install the add-on. It's not broken. You and
Yeah.
I can do this together. And then on top of that, sometimes even with tools kind of like scattering tools on the marketplace where you need to first like import geometry to scatter upon, that'll
Hmm.
be an issue sometimes in the inbox. So it's definitely an art and a craft creating a tool that is complex enough to be compelling for more advanced users, and then also easy enough for the first time sort of Blender user. So I can imagine that's
Yeah.
a big challenge. The other thing you mentioned with this earlier product was marketing. Can you tell us a little bit about your marketing journey? And also, another question, how you receive feedback from your users, what platforms you use for that, and kind of the approach you have for synthesizing that feedback into usable points for developing your product.
That's a good question. So for the marketing on my first car paint one, I I didn't really know what to do. I was just hoping that one post would like kind of blow up and get big enough on Twitter, and I was hoping to get some artists that were big at the time to like use it and to share it and stuff, and that didn't happen. And at the time, doing promotional renders and stuff was just too taxing, and like just trying to get it to like a really high standard of quality every single time, and like trying to do that consistently was just too much. And so I just stopped. I didn't have a large following either on Twitter, and I think I had like less than 100 followers, and so it was really hard to get good reach. And then it just didn't help too. I just didn't pick a good market for what that product was, because it was tailored to people who use them in 4D, which is there's a large market for add-ons in there, but then you also had to use Octane, and then you also had to be an automotive person. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like you're already like niching down 3 levels, and there's only like so much audience you can get from that.
Mm-hmm.
And because it took 2 years to make, I had to kind of just justify a higher price point. So it was definitely my more expensive add-on that I made. I launched it at $200.
Wow.
So that also added a big barrier to a lot of people. People still bought it, and with Cinema 4D being paid, there's kind of like a stereotype where like things are just more expensive.
Mhm.
And but then like my biggest critique was like it's too expensive, and I was like I agree, but I have to justify it for myself as well. So that's when I tried exploring tiers, and I broke it down into like different little levels of complexity of the add-on. Like I stripped it down to the most bare bones thing, and that ended up being the most popular version,
Mhm.
just because it was the most simple. And that's when I realized I was like, oh, people actually want simplicity rather than 700 different controls to make something work.
Awesome
Yeah.
that you dove deep, right? So you had that option when you released your product to play with variants and tiers. Like you had that depth of complexity already built into your original product so that you could
Hmm.
splice it up into different levels of product.
Yeah. That's when I learned that like I can make products for myself because like that's what it was originally going to be. It was like just it was something a tool for myself, and people were like, "Oh, can I have this too?" And I was like, "Okay." And then that's where it's like you can't just make it for yourself. You got to find that balance.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah.
Yeah. So you were on a different platform, you were selling at a higher price point,
Hmm.
you were sort of marketing toward Cinema 4D people. Tell us about your transition into like better marketing strategies and joining Superhive, aka Undermarket, aka Superhive.
Yeah. I kind of dipped my toe in Blender Market Superhive very shortly after the car paint. That's when I was exploring the carbon fiber shader.
Mm-hmm.
And that was me. So like I kind of tested. I was like, oh, this is a much cheaper product, but it's a very simple shader. It still had about the same results. Like didn't do too good. I didn't market it good, but it showed me that like there's still a market. It still like gave me sales every now and then, just passively. And then when I moved to Blender, and eventually I made my first like kind of flagship product, that was Shaders Plus. I it's kind of a like a deeper, long story that I'm going to try and summarize because like there was like just a lot of steps involved. But basically, like so I went from freelancing full time, and I had moved into an apartment with my girlfriend, and at the exact same time that happened, all across the industry, all work stopped. Like all these studios and agencies, they stopped contracting out. So then I lost all my work, and we had the savings going as much as we could, and then we ended up having like 1 month savings left over, and I was like, I don't know what to do because like we tried reaching out to so many studios. I had like 30 interviews in a month trying to find some more work. And then I was like, oh, you know what? Let's just try. Like, I have this old project I was working on. Let's see if we can just, like throw it out there and see what happens. Maybe it'll help pay for groceries or something. Kind of give us another month or so because I didn't expect it to be a full time thing because it never was before. And so I polished it up a little bit and then I put it on Gumroad. And the number one request that I had was to put it on Blender Market. So after like about a month, I was like, okay, let's just put it out there. And then that quickly became the number one source of income or like over Gumroad because people just like that marketplace better.
Mm.
And to market it, that was probably the hardest part out of like anything I've developed. So like car paint took 2 years, but that was at a managed time scale. Marketing it is 100% consistency. So, and that was what I learned from the other stuff. Is like I posted one or two things and I gave up.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like this one, I had to post every single day, and even if it like I only got 2 likes on it, I had to still keep posting. I was like, I just forget about that one. Take maybe like people. This was too complicated. It wasn't engaging enough. So let's make something that kind of pops a bit more, something that's a lot more visually appealing and kind of sensational. And I did my best to focus on that, and I would stay up till like 5 a.m. a lot of nights, just working on whatever I could to keep the post getting out. Because every time I stopped or like took a slow break, and that's when my sales stopped.
Mm.
So it was kind of like I think what made like Shaders Plus successful over my car paint was having that kind of that fire lit under you of like, I moved out and now I've got rent to pay and now I don't have work and I need money. So like that's now my job now, is to make sure that that money keeps coming in.
Gotcha.
So
Yes.
because before with the car paint, there was no fire. Like I was still living at home and there was no like incentive to to work that hard.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, sometimes you need that that pressure to, level up.
yeah.
That's Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome that Shaders Plus did so well after the car paint. Can you tell us a little bit more about posting every day, so consistency is important. Even
Yep.
if you have to stay up till 5 a.m., even if your last post only got 2 likes. You hear that,
Yep.
everybody? It's hard. It's hard not to take that those 2 likes personally. But
Hmm.
like you said, when you gotta pay rent, you gotta pay rent. So what types of posts were working? You're not spending 1,000 hours rendering something beautiful, and sometimes even for these platforms, you don't really need something that's that high quality or that labor intensive. So how did your strategy evolve over those first couple months?
So my biggest hurdle with the car paint was that I thought I had to make a trailer equivalent to like every single post I made, because I was like, it's got to be the best it can look. It's got to be, you're trying to sell it to high end customers. So like you want it to look like final product worthy. And it wasn't possible to be consistent and to pull that off with Shaders Plus. And I found out that just through trial and error, because like I did a few of those and those also did very well, but they didn't really give any more than just showing a screen capture of your viewport and showing off the controls and stuff. So it just became kind of diminishing returns at that point. So then I focused on just showing more so the value of the product.
Mm-hmm.
So showing like kind of like a comparison of like, this is what your scene looks like with normal caustics or with no caustics, and how easy it is, just turn it on and now it's instant, it's real time, it works. And people were like, oh my God, like that's crazy. And those just ended up thankfully being the most successful, which is good for me too, because I don't have to spend time rendering it and editing it. I just like screen record it and post it.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I see that. I'm checking out your Twitter right now. I was gonna
Yeah.
do it on my browser, but I'm afraid of the click clacking of the keyboard. So yeah, I have it up here on my phone, and I see you've pinned a little, like a screen recording. Maybe it's a screen recording. You have like a fancy 3D UI on the
So
left hand side.
that one is not a screen recording. Um,
Well, the 3D
I
UI obviously isn't.
yeah,
Okay. Ooh,
but that one,
there's music.
I get the music.
I dig it. Caustic dance party. Let's
Hmm.
go.
So those ones were actually like a combination of the two kind of ideas. So it's like it's still like a viewport. It's like showing you how easy it is and intuitive. It's like you just move a slider and you get the result, and also showing you the finished result. So you're not looking at like a denoised viewport and it's just like super bland. It's like it's something fun and engaging, and yeah. And that one ended up, I think, being the most well received one, but
Hmm.
it's still definitely very time consuming to make those ones.
Yeah, it looks great. Definitely looks really good.
Thank
Um, Can you tell us about the community that you've built around your products? Do you have a Discord? How do
I
you?
do.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
what's your Discord and how do you have it set up and what's the purpose of it?
I'm still trying to figure out what like identity I want the Discord to be, because I originally started out when I was making car paint and it's just evolved slowly over time. And then I wanted a place because a lot of people were trying to reach out and sharing their stuff on Twitter and Instagram. And I was like, I want you guys to be able to like share it with each other. So I kind of reformatted my Discord. It's called SMOUSE Studio. So it's like just a little, it was originally about like the stuff I was making. So that's like why it's like SMOUSE studio, but I want it to be a bit more for kind of everyone to engage and share stuff. And yeah, so now I've got channels in there where people can, like, there's like the Shaders Plus channel and the Gobos channel, and people share all the work that they make with it. And there's like just general artwork channels that people can share what they're working on, and it's very fun.
Awesome. Yeah, I find Discord to
Yeah.
be a really wonderful place for people to
Mm-hmm.
not only ask questions but build community. So I'm a big fan of Discord. It's been a huge help in my own personal Blender learning journey. I would not have been able to participate in a single day of November without that platform. So big ups to Discord.
Mm-hmm.
What was I going to ask you? Okay, Discord, community building. Oh yeah, it just occurred to me, and I might cut this and put this in the front of this interview, but SMOUSE. What is SMOUSE? Who is SMOUSE? You're SMOUSE, but how? How did SMOUSE?
So it's not like it's not a crazy story. It's more of like kind of like a result of damage control. Because my original name, way back in like 2013, it used to be called Spastic Mouse, and that was just like I made that. It was like a Minecraft name I was trying to come up with at the time, and I couldn't think of anything fun. And I had a mouse, like my computer mouse kept being glitchy, and it would like kind of go spastic over the screen.
Yeah.
And I was like, what if I like call it Spastic Mouse? And then it just stuck, and then I used that for a good few years. And then I had some people, like when I started doing more client work and doing art stuff, I had some people from Europe message me, and they're like, hey, why is your name like this? It's actually a little offensive. And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, spastic is not a good term to use out of context. It's a medical term to describe conditions. And I was like, it's probably not a identity I want myself to be branded as. So, but I didn't want to like come up with a whole brand new name and then like alienate my entire audience that I was trying to build. So I got rid of 90% of the first word and just combined it, so it became mouse.
SMOUSE.
And then I was,
Oh, okay.
and then that helps make it more unique. It's like its own kind of name and
Yeah.
helps it stand out. So it ended up being good in the end.
Yeah, I love it. It's very succinct and eye-catching, especially with the all caps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like it. That's an interesting evolution. Lots of iterations.
Yeah.
I also wasn't aware that maybe is not the most appropriate term to use outside of a medical context.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, TIL. And yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So this is going to be more for the creators on our site. How do you manage your time, and how do you have a schedule for posting? Do you have a schedule for building? Do you have a schedule for customer support? If you don't have a schedule, how do you approach it? All of the different hats that one has to wear as a creator on the marketplace.
Honestly, I'm still trying to figure that out. It's so chaotic because like not a single day is the same as the last. So early on, I did have more of a schedule when I was like having to be very, very consistent with things. And like when if you didn't get if you didn't reach your daily quota of sales to like pay rent, then you had to like work overtime the next day. So I was being very, very consistent and structured back then. And for that, I used to post I used to prep content the day before, like a few days in advance, and then Twitter, I think it's on the paid subscription. It has a function that you can schedule tweets. And so I would make a backlog of content that I would share. And I'd have it set to schedule or set to post on certain times of the day. And I was just being super analytical over my posts of like trying to figure out like which post, because I would repost posts. And I found out a very effective way of being consistent was to be able to reuse your previously posted stuff. So you don't have to make a new piece of content every single time you post. It's good to just have like this, like a large pool that you can cycle through. And when I started doing that, I realized certain ones kept being just as successful as the first time, but then some died off and couldn't be reused anymore. And for that, so like I studied those, and I made sure to like keep those scheduled, and like I figured out like if this one did a little bit better than this last time, what did that? Was it a time, like time of day thing, day of the week? So I studied that, and then I'd schedule it for that, and that was more of the process when I had to be super consistent. And then eventually, like as things started to kind of take off on their own and be a lot more self-sufficient, I was able to kind of take a step back and focus more on continuing like developing stuff, because there was a sacrifice of time of like having to like market it so consistently. You gave up a lot of time for developing further, and with that came a lot of support messages, so that took up a lot of time as well, and that still takes up a lot of time. uh, so really like the goal is to like start, if you're like starting out, find the things that work and make a large pool of it, and just kind of keep recycling those over time. It's like I think I would have like a month's worth of content I would just keep posting out over and over, and get it into a spot where you can kind of, it runs itself, and focus on the community, focus on like helping support and stuff and solving all their problems. And now it's like whenever messages come in, I try and get to them first thing in the morning or last thing at night. And throughout the day, like I'm in a period now where I don't have to post so consistently, so I can like still work on new projects, and then I can start sharing those on Twitter and like keep the content fresh, because you don't want to just be like, people only know you as, oh, they advertise their products. You still want to like, if you want to like be known as something else, you want to like keep nurturing that. So share new things you're working on, share free value. So I'd share some like free little tips of like, here's how you can like, I made a one that's like how to make a basketball hoop in 30 seconds, and that did like, it blew up. And so like, so just kind of giving little nuggets kind of over time, that helps a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Especially in a day and age where there's a lot of bots online, and sometimes people just want that human touch.
Hmm.
So you're not just, selling them something. You're also
Yeah.
a blender head yourself. I feel like that's really
Hmm.
important. We do have we have a pretty large marketplace, and there's a wide range of people who sell on the marketplace. And some of those people are much more on the creator side, like identify as 3D artists, identify as blender heads, go to events such as Beacon. And then others are more on the dev side. And then there's, it's a huge marketplace that's global. So sometimes we have people who aren't even really that interested in Blender in general. So, it's always really exciting to come across someone who makes awesome products, but is also an artist in their own right, and like a person who likes to experiment and use Blender in their own right. So
Yeah.
that's really cool. I'll have to check out the procedural basketball thing. Proceduralism, man, is so sick. I feel like
Hmm.
Blender has gotten so much more attention ever since the geometry nodes came out, and they've been improving so much with each build, especially on sites like Twitter, because there's something so satisfying about watching like a procedural scene get created in real time in Blender.
Hmm.
It's just, I don't know. It's like sludge content meets like math content.
Hmm.
And I'm a big fan. I noticed that you've mentioned Twitter or like X a couple of times. Are you just on that social media, or do you kind of diversify the platforms that you post on?
Yeah, so I found that Twitter is the best place to get engagement for art stuff, just because it's the whole way their system works is that it's built to be shared. So it's a great way to like for people to reshare it and to get seen by a lot more eyes. Where like Instagram and I've tried Reddit, And like the Blender subreddit is not as friendly to advertising, especially like consistent advertising. But kind of posting everywhere still is beneficial because like there's this YouTuber named Curtis Holt, and he saw my work very early on from Reddit, and then he ended up being my first affiliate, and he did a few shout outs about Shaders Plus early on, and that was really hugely helpful. And then we started talking, and now we're good friends, and like posting everywhere, but finding what works the best for consistency, what gives you the best engagement. And I found like, yeah, Twitter is the best place. I've got a friend, Casey Sheep, who uses Facebook, and they said that Facebook groups for them were kind of the same as what Twitter is for me, but they actually moved to Twitter as well because it's just it is like the spot to get growth and engagement.
That's really
So
interesting.
it's kind of like trying everything out and seeing what works because it's all different for other people, but
Yeah.
that's what we found to be the most consistent.
Do you find that most of your affiliates, your current affiliates, have reached out to you directly in the past? Or do you
So
seek out affiliates as well?
early on, when I was trying to break out of that like kind of consistent trap of like if I didn't meet this quota a day, then I had to redo it. I reached out to a lot. I would cold email a bunch of affiliates, and I'd offer them even just a generous discount or a generous commission. And some of them took me up on it, and some like never even got a response from them. But yeah, and then so before I got onto the front page around like last Black Friday, it was really hard to get into contact with affiliates. And after it got on the front page, now people saw it as like, oh, this is a product we're talking about now. So then now I get tons of emails about it.
Oh, wow. Okay. So front page on Blender
Yeah.
Market or on Superhive.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, we get a lot of questions about affiliates and how to help people sort of strategize and reach out. So that's a huge question. I feel like the advice I normally give is reach out to people in your social network, people
Yeah.
who are making stuff that's kind of in the same sort of field and like theme as you, and someone you have ideally some kind of relationship with outside of the affiliate thing. Yeah.
And I found too that when you reach out to like say YouTubers and stuff, it's better to approach it in a way that like you want to build a relationship with them first, like an honest friendship and not like a business relationship. Because I found that with the affiliates that I do have, we all started out as like just kind of chit chatting, and then it eventually grew into like, oh hey, like I'm making a video, I'm going to be talking about your stuff. I just want to let you know, not asking for anything, and it's like I'll give you a commission, like you deserve a commission. So
Yeah.
starting it from a friendship first standpoint is very important.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's really good advice for people. I think the
Yeah.
worst, like that's very off-putting when you receive a message from somebody and you can tell that the message is like a template and it's been like blasted to hundreds of creators all over the internet. So yeah, that's great advice.
Curtis actually got an email one time from like a similar kind of email, and they forgot to change the first name in their template. So it's like instead of being like, "Hey Curtis," it's like, "Hey David," and he's like,
I used to go by David in my past life. How did he know? Yeah, those typos. So, okay, we're talking about affiliates, we're talking about marketing. What is your favorite thing about selling on Blender Market? This leading question.
probably the community that it fosters and the kind of friendly competition that comes with it, because the ability to like to see like how many sales a product has, for me that was very motivating early on, of like if this product costs this much, even if most of those came from a sale, so let's say like they made half that value, but then like times the amount of thousands of sales I got, I was like, there's a lot of potential here. And so when I started out, like that was my goal of like, when I first launched Shaders Plus, I had a goal of hitting 1,000 sales in the first year. And that helped drive that consistency of like, I saw that sales were coming in and I could bring in sales. And then I saw people like Casey Sheep who came in and with a product that was like super cheap, and then they got like thousands of sales in the first few months. And I was like, it gives you more fuel to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And then it eventually hit 1,000 sales in the first 9 months, and then now it's at 2,000, and that's from like the competition of like Casey and I are really good friends now, and we are like friendishly competing against each other. Of like every time there's a product sale, like we both share back and forth tips for like the product page, how to make the product page more engaging and more visually appealing,
Mm-hmm.
more efficient, just nice. And then it's kind of like a race. Whereas like on Gumroad, it's like it's very like it feels like you just have a cubicle in an office. Whereas like Blender Market or Superhive feels like it's like a big room where everyone is free to chat and talk with each other.
Heck yeah. Oh, I really like that. That's a great
Yeah.
analogy. Speaking of product pages, how do you go
Mhm.
about designing your product page? And do you use any tools for that?
Yeah. So when I first started, I just used the basic kind of HTML tools that come with the editor, the product page editor. And you can still do like really, really good looking pages with that if you know how to do it. But when I was learning that, I didn't know web development. I didn't know programming at that level. So I was having a hard time finding something to like. I, I saw that you could host websites when I was looking at pages like the physical Starlight and Atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
I saw like their post on Twitter, like they had a web developer come in and they redid it and they hosted their own website. And I was like, you can host a website on the product page. And I was like, well, now I just need to find a website builder.
Mm-hmm.
And then Casey Sheep actually used a website called Card, so CARRD, and it's just like a social media landing page is what it was built for. But the tools that they have allow you to make a full website. And so I started doing that because it's very simple, just drag and drop elements. It's a lot faster to get really kind of advanced and nice looking features without having to do any like back end coding. Um, and then just kind of going back and forth in like your draft, like making sure everything's formatted right. It all fits with the format that Blender Market uses. And then yeah, just kind of iterating from there because like and kind of figuring out what card is capable of. Casey and I both kind of we inspired our pages like after each product. So it's like I redesigned Shaders Plus after one of their products, and then like some of my own stuff I wanted to do, and then they liked some of the stuff I did, and so they went and inspired it off of Shaders Plus with their own take, and then I was like, oh, that's really cool. I like what you did there. So I went and did that with the Gobos, and so it's just like this fun kind of iterative like finding inspirations and seeing what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and some things that are really good for the customer of just making it a good experience is having things that are interactive. So having like a bunch of videos and stuff is really good, and having like this little slider so you can like move back and forth between like this is with our product and without our product, and just having that engagement makes people feel a lot more like connected with the product,
Mm-hmm.
I guess. And I learned of this one website from Diffuse Studio on the Blender Market. It's called Juxtapose,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a free before and after slider thing that you can. They have an HTML like embed that you can put into Card, and it's all super awesome.
Yeah, that is really awesome. I love the slider.
Hmm.
It's so simple, but it's so fun, and it makes you feel like you're really discovering something new and getting like a peek behind the curtain of the product. And Diffuse with three F's product page also looks really
Yes,
amazing. So it's
yeah.
awesome.
There's and theirs is all. HTML as well.
Oh,
So they don't
really?
use, yeah. And that's
Oh,
what I originally tried replicating what they did with HTML as well, and I couldn't figure it out. It's super simple, but I'm just not knowledgeable in that.
yeah.
But and then that's when I found Card, and I was like, this saves me a huge hassle because now I don't have to spend like my time is already so thin with having to do like marketing consistently and then keep updating the product so that you're not just like you upload one product and that's it forever.
Hmm.
And then customer support. I was like, I don't have time to go study web development and I don't know what I need to know. So
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah, why not use the resources that are available to you right now?
yeah,
No shame in the game. That's what
yeah,
we're
absolutely.
for. You know, we're a
Hmm.
tool based marketplace. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
you got
I
to
feel
use the
like
tools you got.
absolutely. Yeah, I remember when I started out with Blender, I felt like, especially with November, there was a lot of like vector displacement happening. And at first, I was like, I have to learn how to do this, even though it's so hard for me to wrap my head around. But then I was like, I don't really need to make a ice cream cone that's shader displaced, you know?
Yeah,
Like I don't really need that. Like I don't have to be a purist on that level, even though I have so much respect for people who can do that and want to do that. And I feel like there's a lot of folks like that in the community, which is great. But sometimes you have a vision, an artistic vision, and you just gotta scrap to get there. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, so I think we're in the final stretch here. Thank you for your time. I'm going to ask
yeah, no
you,
problem.
what are your goals for the future as a creator, as an artist? Do you have any plans that you'd like to share with us? Tell us about what's on your plate right now.
So for this year, my biggest goal is to optimize my like development workflow and just scale. Because I've had this past year and like not being able to have time to continue developing, I like kind of stockpiled a bunch of ideas of like I would see things on Twitter and I was like, oh, like I really want to make this my own thing, or I'd be working a freelance job and I had to come up with my own solution. And I was like, this would be a really good product, but I don't have time to. And so my goal for this year is to release a lot of more of those products and in a way that is still like you don't want to overload yourself with marketing and customer support. So it's really about finding how can I do that without burning out.
Mm-hmm.
And so and figuring out what like the next step of marketing is. And I'm finding that emails, so you do like the hard work at first of like marketing consistently, you build as much of an audience as possible through your emails. And then once you have that, then you can just that is your new like your new Twitter. So now it's like you can just you've got thousands of people you can reach just with a single post. And so like that's when I released Gobos, that was I just put out one email and then that was like instantly on the front page the same day. So that was a lot more successful than a Twitter post, which takes like several days of trying to build it up just to like hopefully get enough to get on the front page. So it's more of like the next step of marketing. It's like focusing on your emails and nurturing those
Yeah,
and yeah.
absolutely.
And that saves a lot of time.
Do you get most of your email addresses like from people signing up and purchasing through the marketplace, or do you have a separate way for people to sign up for like your newsletter for information from you?
I so most of my emails right now just do come from the Blender Market and Gumroad,
Mhm.
but I do want to explore doing a newsletter as well of just like kind of as a new way of like or not new way but another way of kind of sharing that value and content with people
Yeah, awesome.
because it is so distilled and like it just helps nurture those people that kind of stick with you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel like it's better for people's brains as well to have a creator that they want to follow and not have to scroll through a giant feed of various unrelated media snippets. Like personally, I'm
Hmm.
I'm a big fan of of newsletters, of what's it called? Substack and other like writing based platforms that you can subscribe to specific creators and then get those articles and information directly into your inbox. I feel like that's better for my brain personally than like
Yeah.
Twitter or Instagram.
Yeah, because Twitter is just so noisy, and it's like there's things that distract you and things that aren't relevant. So having like just a distilled place of being able to share things that you feel like would be valuable is a lot more valuable.
Cool.
I think like the biggest points of that I wanted to focus on was like like being consistent and being simple but not too simple
Yeah.
with your stuff,
Okay.
but being consistent
Nice. Yeah.
and giving yourself a something that lights a fire under you, keep you motivated. So something that I was listening to Blender Guru's podcast last year, and he said when he was trying to learn something, he had run into the same problem of like you just lose motivation and you just give up. So he told his cousin, he's like, I'm going to give you $1,000 if I don't achieve this benchmark by this time. And that was his motivation of like, now there's a consequence to it, and that consequence keeps you motivated and keeps you moving.
Yeah. My dad used to put like $100 bills on the last page of really long books, and that's how he got himself
Oh.
to read. I like that Blender Guru reference because like if I were his cousin, I would be texting him and calling him all the time, like full scale
Hmm.
distraction. You know, like,
Yep.
oh, you have to watch this movie. The movie is Tenet, you know. You have to watch this movie. This movie is Dune 2, you know.
Hmm.
The longest films in the history of cinema. Yeah, motivation is hard but important. And especially for people like us, you know, creators who are fixers, doers, excited about like all the new tools out there. There's so many cool things to work on all the time. And like, yeah, committing to one and staying focused is quite the challenge.
Yeah. And like in that, it does make you like you have to sacrifice some stuff. So like I was stuck in Blender 3.6 for a long time. When like after 4.0 came out, 4.1 was almost out, and I was still in 3.6 because like I had to fix things. I couldn't just abandon it and leave it. I had to like keep working until it was done, and then it was finished, and then I could move on.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
but like you see all these fancy tools, and you're like, I just like you're like itching. You're like, I just want to dive into it, but then you don't want to spoil yourself, and then you go back to it, and now it's miserable. You just gotta stay at it.
absolutely. Yeah, staying up to date with builds is another thing. How do you do that?
I hosted a survey pretty early on asking people if they preferred kind of legacy maintenance. So like you support older versions and how many people like really cared about that versus keeping things updated for the newer stuff. And I think like 70-80% of the people voted for staying up to date. So whenever a new update comes out, I go through and make sure that everything works fine. But a lot of times with that too, there's a balance of you have to end up sacrificing support for the previous versions too. So with 4. Here's 4.0 or 4.1. It was the new principled like shader labels. So like they added the labeling like sub what do you call it? Like the drop downs
Mm-hmm.
to your node groups. When they added that kind of broke a lot of support for backwards compatibility.
Mm.
So when I updated Shaders Plus, I included that as the new like a new fancy thing to look forward to. And that then prevented support for 3.6 because now it's all disorganized, doesn't look good. So, but everyone said that they prefer staying up to date. So, there's kind of a trade off you have to figure out.
Yeah.
And some people still like they continue support for each version of Blender. It's like they'll still go and do legacy support. I don't have time for that. So,
Yeah, it's a lot of
yeah,
work.
it's a lot
Especially
of work.
yeah, especially as we don't have like a subscription model yet.
Hmm.
You know, we may in the future, we may not, but it's a lot of work for the cost of
Yeah.
And it's awesome though that you reached out to your community directly and you took a poll asking what people would prefer, what's most important to them. I feel like that's, you're going to the people, you're asking the people directly what they want
Hmm.
from you, so you have that direct line of communication with your community, which is great.
Yeah. Well, and like I feel like that's it. It's not as much of a given as I expected it to be, but like it's like these people are paying my rent. Like I got to keep them happy. So like I'll make something that they want and make sure that they're happy and not something that I feel like that they should be happy with. And if they're not, then they're wrong. Like that's not a good mindset to have. So
Totally.
because you're making things for them, you're making the solution that caters to them. So you got to make sure it works for them.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you so much, Cody Smouse, for talking to us today. It was a pleasure having you. I really appreciate all your insights and feedback and sharing your story. And best of luck with scaling in the products in this coming year.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.